A new episode of the podcast, recording this on a Friday. Congratulations, we made it through the week, unless you're listening to this at the beginning of a week, and then at which point I hope that your week goes really well and you make it through it. Sean Widmer Podcast, thank you again for downloading, subscribing, telling people about the podcast. Thank you for the people who are interacting with it on Twitter, at Sean T. Widmer on Twitter. I'm going to ask for some situational help here in a moment. We're going to get into that in a second. I do have a baby question as well. Yesterday was, and then on a separate note from the baby question, yesterday was set to be one of the worst days ever. And so I want to get into that as the story you need to know today. And we'll do that here in just a couple minutes. As always, if you're listening to the podcast or watching the video on YouTube, if you go to the description, we got timestamps so you can find out the thing you need to get to when you need to get to it. So I want to start with a question to parents. Where do kids hide things? Where do kids put things? Because they make things disappear, and I don't know how, because I am technically, I would say, smarter than my child, my 1-year-old child. But I have no clue where our TV remote is. We've had our first casualty in the life of Olivia Widmer, and that is my downstairs TV remote control. Normally, these things get sucked into the couch on a regular basis. That's fine. That's fine. But this time, Olivia has taken this remote control and put it somewhere in our house, and we cannot find it. To save our lives, we cannot find it. We've looked everywhere in the house 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. We just haven't looked in the place where it is 1 time. That's the problem. I've looked everywhere 4 times, one place not 4 times, not one place 0 times, and that is the place she chose to put the remote. So I ask, where do they put them? Where do kids put stuff? Where have you found stuff, parents? Where do I need to look? I mean, it's so frustrating. I love her to death, but good Lord, kid. What do you want me to do? Come in there and hide your books to get payback? And of course, I mean, I know it's around. It's not like she's getting up on top of anything and putting it on the tippy top of something where you're never going to find it. She's not very smart to open things. So who knows where she put this thing, but it just so happens to be in the most magical place of all time. Okay. The question I actually had for you, though. My wife had a really wild situation happen. I guess it's not really wild. It's just an interesting situation. And I want to ask what you would do in this so she and I can discuss it coming up later in the pod. So maybe Monday or Tuesday. This is your homework. What would you have done? She went to Starbucks, and we are figuring out our budget just because we finally decided to grow up and make one. And in doing that, it's, we've had to do a month of, well, it's ended up being 2 months of just, okay, what are we spending so we can piece it together like, okay, we need to spend this much on gas. We need to spend this much on groceries. So we're piecing all that together so we can put together a nice little spreadsheet. So end of the month, Anna was looking at it going, okay, I'm trying to spend as little as possible so that we can get the accurate reading on our budget. I don't know if any of that makes sense. That's how we're doing it. So she goes through the drive-thru, and she goes to the Starbucks, and she is looking to spend as little as money as possible. So she's not going to get any pastry. She's not going to get a big coffee drink. All she's getting is a black coffee. I think she said her bill was $2.19 or something like that. So she's just going to get the black coffee, and she gets up to the window, and it has been paid for by the car in front of her. So that's great. But then the person working talks about the pay it forward chain that's going on. And Anna, of course, can't just sit there and be like, oh, that's great. What a cool thing. I'm done and be done, because that's not who we are up here at the Widmer house. We're pay it forward people. We like to live in these things. So Anna goes, well, what do we got for the car behind us? It was like $17. So her brain is whirling because she was planning on trying to be cheap and spend $2 on a drink, even though she wanted to spend more, but was trying to be smart about it money-wise. And now she's in a situation where the opportunity is there to continue a pay it forward streak at $17, $15 more than she wanted to spend. And had she known she was going to spend that much, she would have got the drink she wanted and some kind of pastry or whatever breakfast sandwich that they have at the Starbucks, the place that sold the Sonics. Just a reminder to everyone when you're out and about today doing your coffee drinking. What would you do? What do you do? What do what do you do in that situation? Because I think there's options, and I think only one of them is the right option. So I think one of the options is partially pay. I think that's the dumbest option. If you, I feel like partially paying is the worst thing you can do. Hey, the car in front of you didn't quite buy your drinks, but they paid for $5. I don't think you can do that. I think you really have two choices: not pay or pay it. That's it. She chose to pay it, which I'm very thankful for. She was very bummed about it. She chose to pay it. But had she not, I would have understood where she was coming from. What would you have done in that situation? And is that other option open? The partial pay doesn't sound right. So we ran into that situation. I think we'll get into it with her on Monday's episode, how she processed it. And then, of course, I'd love to know what everyone out there would do. Would you have paid it or not? And you can always hit me up on my Twitter or my Instagram at Sean T. Widmer. Okay, story you need to know. Yesterday was going to be a wild day. My favorite football team is the Seattle Seahawks. In fact, they are probably my second favorite sports team of all sports, Blazers being number 1, Seattle Seahawks being number 2. And inside of that realm of the Seahawks, Russell Wilson is the greatest. He is the greatest. He's the greatest Seattle Seahawk of all time. He's the only quarterback who has taken the Seahawks to a Super Bowl. I understand, before everyone jumps in there, I understand. He won them a Super Bowl, took them to a Super Bowl and they won, and then he took them to a Super Bowl and they lost. And the Super Bowl that they went to and won had a lot to do with the defense. The Super Bowl they went to and lost had a lot to do with Russell Wilson throwing an interception at the 1-yard line. So I already know that part, Seahawks fans, but you can't deny Russell Wilson's greatness. You can't deny Russell Wilson's leadership. You can't deny that Russell Wilson, since he's been on the Seahawks, has done such a good job keeping this team valuable. And the amount of times he has won games at the end where he has won them and that's put Seattle in a position to be as good as they are record-wise throughout the season. Russ is the man. Russ is going to be an instant Ring of Honor guy for the Seahawks. He's a Hall of Famer. He's the best Seahawk ever. So, Russell Wilson yesterday, all of a sudden I look at Twitter and his name is at the top of the Twitter list, which is terrible. When you're trending at the top, it's normally not good. You've normally done something bad or something bad has happened. And Russell Wilson doesn't go to the children's hospital. Unfortunately, this isn't how Twitter works. Russell Wilson doesn't just go to the children's hospital and then suddenly, Russell Wilson's trending because he's a good human. It's like Russell Wilson's trending. He did something bad. Yesterday he was trending because all the reports are looking at Russell Wilson having a break in the relationship with the Seahawks, a shattered relationship. And the trade rumors were out there, and they've happened before, but these ones seemed a little more serious because Russell Wilson seems to be having problems with the coaching staff. And I get where Russell Wilson's coming from. Now, it's fun because yesterday I talked to a bunch of people, and my buddy John was completely on one side where he's more Seahawks than Russ, and a couple of my other buddies were more Russ than Seahawks. And it's interesting, all the different opinions on this guy. My personal opinion on Russ is the Seahawks need him, and that he is a fantastic football player who makes your team very good, makes your team better, him by himself. So when the story came across and you go, okay, Russell Wilson's asked to be traded, that's like getting kicked in your sports groin, because that means your team is going to suffer dramatically the next couple seasons, because when the leader of your team, the person who touches the ball on every play on offense, is changed, that doesn't always go well. In fact, look at the Super Bowl this year. The two teams who are in the Super Bowl have unbelievable quarterbacks. Tom Brady, the greatest football player of all time, and Patrick Mahomes, one of the next greatest football players of all time, and on a young career already. Quarterback's huge. The quarterback position is the most important position to your team. There's very rarely a time where a Super Bowl champion comes out of the game and it's like, their quarterback was just mediocre and the system won them a Super Bowl. That doesn't happen. Good quarterbacks win you Super Bowls. That's how that works. That's documented in a little thing called, here's the teams that have won the Super Bowl. So Russ wants to get traded. I feel this sickness in my stomach, and then the stories start coming about him having problems with the coaching staff. And I started to realize this is going to be a sucky offseason for the Seahawks because it looks like the Seahawks are going to have to choose one or the other. It looks like the Seahawks are going to have to choose Pete Carroll or choose Russell Wilson, which is hard because both those guys are great. And Pete Carroll has been an awesome coach for the Seattle Seahawks. Energy-wise, culture-wise, he's just a fantastic guy to have on the sideline and has been for the Seahawks for a number of years. Russell Wilson, someone who's in MVP discussion every single year. Someone who's taken this team to the Super Bowl twice. Like I said before, someone who wins at the end. Big-time winner. Seems to be a pretty good guy. Not going to be a problem. You're not going to see a lot of issues coming out of Russell Wilson's camp. So these two guys have apparently had some issues in their relationship, and it looks like one's going to have to go, and it sucked yesterday because having to compartmentalize that in a Seahawks fan's brain and saying Pete Carroll probably is the one who has to go was hard. But for me, that's where I'm at right now. I think you keep Russ. You got to get rid of Pete Carroll. Russell Wilson is 32 and still has a lot of good years left. Pete Carroll's really old, and I think we got a lot of the best years. And unfortunately, if you're having to choose, which it looks like you're going to have to do, you got to go with the guy who's at the prime of his career. You also have to go with the guy who plays the game and plays the position that really matters a ton on your football team. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I'm interested. I'm interested in seeing where the Seahawks go with this. It's funny. My buddy Matt hit me up on Twitter immediately with the numbers. Numbers guy, Matt, get out of here. Come on, numbers guy. He hit me with the trading Russ would be a $39 million cap hit in 2021. They're currently only $2 million below the cap. They'd have to receive a hell of a deal to even consider a trade, i.e. 5 first, second round picks plus rookie contract. Trading for Dak Prescott or Derek Carr would be unlikely with their salary hits. I understand there's a lot of numbers behind trades in the NFL, and there's a lot that goes on there. If a team wants Russell Wilson, they're going to get Russell Wilson, regardless of the numbers you throw out there about, oh, here's the salary cap, here's the salary hit. If a team wants him, they're going to get him. And Russell Wilson is valuable enough to get the numbers that are going to be needed. That's how good of a football player he is. So I understand there might be some numbers issues with things financially. I don't even think you put that into the picture. If a team wants Russ, they're going to go get Russ. And if a team wants to win, they're going to go get Russ because he's that good at football. Yesterday was just sad, though. It started making me think of all of the terrible sports things. And by the way, Russell Wilson did not get traded. He's not traded yet. So who knows what's going to happen? Is he going to be gone by the beginning of the season, or is Pete Carroll going to be gone? I can't imagine they both stick around throughout the whole summer. It just seems like that relationship is now split to the point it's not going to be fixed. Russ needs, and Russ, I'm in his camp a little bit on this. I have never liked how Russell Wilson's offense works. I've never liked the support they've given him where he needs it the most in his offensive line. And Russ coming out after the Super Bowl and saying, look out, Tom Brady never gets hit. Why am I? I understand Russ gets hit a lot more than Tom Brady because he gets out of the pocket. He runs around. But also when you watch a lot of Seahawks games, there's dudes in the backfield the second the ball is snapped way too often. Way too often. He does not have a good offensive line and has not had a good offensive line. And if I was Russell Wilson, I also wouldn't want to get hit a whole bunch. I would imagine that's the case for every single quarterback in the NFL. Every one of them. Anyways, this situation yesterday where Russ was going to get potentially at any moment could have got traded started to make me feel sick to my stomach. I'm a diehard Seahawks fan, and I started going, okay, where's it going to rank in the echelon of sadness? And I think right now my top 3 sports sadness moments are the Sonics getting sold. I already mentioned my cheap shot at Starbucks earlier. That was brutal. Sonics getting sold, my favorite sports team getting sold, was absolutely terrible for me. The other one was the Seahawks losing the Super Bowl to the Patriots. That was a kick to the gut. We were in Phoenix or in Scottsdale, and then had to drive. We drove back to Spokane, and it was the most quiet ride in the world. We had an RV, and there was, 7 of us. I don't think a word was spoken in that RV for 4 hours. Just driving. Not a word. No one said anything. We'd all been kicked in the gut as hard as you can. And then my third is probably Gonzaga losing the national championship in, 2017 to North Carolina. Those are the 3 right now. But if Russell Wilson in his prime gets traded from the Seahawks, one of my favorite teams, that's going to be a really hard one to swallow. And it might jump into the top 3. Because that's going to hurt a lot to lose him and know that another team is going to have him. Okay, your story you need to know, though. Keep your eyes peeled this weekend. Who knows what's going to go with the Russ drama? Let me know. Let me know what you think at Sean T. Widmer on Twitter, at Sean T. Widmer on Instagram, and Matt Schmidt. Keep them coming. Keep the numbers coming because I never understand them, but they seemed very elaborate, and they did make me feel confident that the Seahawks were going to keep him. Have a great weekend, everyone. That's it. That's the podcast. That's a week of podcasts right there. If you're feeling frisky, head over to iTunes, hit the review button on the podcast. I would really appreciate it. Rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend, all the things that are normal. Have a great weekend.